Welcome to the Two Wars channel, and today I will tell you about the last major offensive operation of the Third Reich. On a frosty spring night in 45, under cover of pitch darkness, tracks of tanks tore through the frozen ground. Without artillery and air preparation, 300 self-propelled assault guns and tanks of the Leibstander Division, supported by infantry, shook the already fragile spring ice on Lake Balaton and penetrated the ranks of the Red Army. This created a threat of breaking through the main line of Soviet defense. Thus began the last large-scale offensive of the Third Reich. In fact, long before the start of the German operation, in February, Soviet intelligence received information about large movements of enemy troops in Western Hungary. In the general staff, no one could believe that, given the imminent danger to Berlin, let me remind you that the front line was 50 to 70 kilometers from the German capital. The Reich leadership would send its best tank units to fight in Hungary. By order of Hitler, the 6th Panzer Army, under Colonel General Joseph Dietrich and consisting of 4 panzer divisions, was transferred from the Western Front to the Hungarian direction. Its transfer was carried out in the strictest secrecy and was disguised as the movement of training and engineering units. The attack plan was named Operation Spring Awakening. The German army delivered 3 rapid strikes, the main one originating from the northeastern part of Lake Balaton by the forces of the 6th Panzer Army and the 6th Field Army. They were supported by the 3rd Hungarian Army. The strike formation of Army Group South delivered a blow in the southeast direction. The second strike was delivered by the 2nd Panzer Army towards Kaposvar. The third strike was delivered by the 91st Army Corps in the direction towards the 6th Panzer Army. The concentration of tanks reached 60 to 70 vehicles per kilometer, deploy vehicles per kilometer. To understand the scale of this density of equipment, you can imagine 7 to 8 tanks placed along the length of a football field. Such strikes were intended to break through Soviet defenses and defeat the Third Ukrainian Front, after which it was necessary to recapture Budapest and turn south. Adolf Hitler made a military strategic bet on the Alpine Fortress doctrine, which required Hungarian oil fields. The core of his plan. The Alpine Fortress is a hard-to-reach area in the Austrian and Bavarian Alps. With neutral Switzerland behind them, the German forces planned to take up defensive positions, block the few passable Alpine passes, and defend, waiting for a split within the anti-Hitler coalition. General Guderian proposed an alternative use of the 6th Panzer Army in Pomerania or Silesia for the further defense of Berlin, but Hitler did not accept this viewpoint. Before the start of the operation, the USSR had more than 400,000 troops against the German 430,000. Additionally, the Red Army had 7,000 artillery pieces and mortars against 5,600 German ones, and 400 tanks against 900 German tanks. From this data, it is clear that the main advantage of the Wehrmacht was in their armored units, on which they placed their primary hope. The front where the main blow concentrated, the Soviet defense built in 2 echelons. The first powerful strike by the Wehrmacht was delivered March 6th on the 57th Army sector. The new tanks, King Tiger and Panther, were used extensively. By the end of the day, German soldiers had penetrated up to 4 kilometers in the sector of the 26th and 4th Guards armies. The Soviet command urgently deployed all its operational reserves. The next day, now with the support of the Luftwaffe, the Germans resumed the attack. They constantly maneuvered to find a weak spot in the Soviet defense and push further inland. Later, March 8th to 9th, Wehrmacht launched main forces into main strike. About 250 tanks operated. With superior Soviet aviation, Wehrmacht continued night offensive. As a result, the German forces penetrated the Soviet defenses by 10 to 20 kilometers. The next day, March 10th, the 5th Air Army and the 9th Guards Army joined the battle, significantly strengthening the Soviet Army's defense. The next 3 days saw very heavy fighting, as a result of which the German command decided to deploy its last reserve into the 6th Panzer Division. Despite all efforts, the German army managed to advance only 30 kilometers into the loop of Soviet defenses and then came to a halt. By March 15th, the Germans no reserves, resources, or strength left for further advancement. The German attack stalled. under the cover of SS tank units, which continued to fight, the main formations retreated. But soon even the elite SS units ceased their resistance.
Finally, all chances for a major success disappeared, and the previously high morale of the SS divisions was lost. Under the cover of fiercely fighting tank crews, entire units were retreating despite the order.
Upon learning of the operation's failure, Adolf Hitler raged and ordered the tank crews to remove their honorary cuff titles. However, the Red Army was not without its own command and officer errors.
Recently, on some fronts, there have been instances of carelessness and negligence, which the enemy has exploited to deliver sudden and significant blows to us. As a result of these blows, our troops were forced to retreat. The retreat in these cases was disorganized. The troops suffered heavy losses in manpower and especially in material resources. During the Commission's work, 968 burned, knocked out and abandoned ISU tanks, as well as 446 armored personnel carriers and high-mobility vehicles were taken into account and inspected. A little over 400 vehicles of the greatest interest were studied, marked, and photographed. All heavy tanks, as well as new models of self-propelled artillery and heavy gun-armored cars, were subjected to special examination. Among the destroyed armored units were 19 King Tiger tanks, 6 Tiger tanks, and 57 Panther tanks. 37 Panther tanks, 37 Panther tanks, 37 Panther tanks, 37 Panther tanks, 37 tanks Panther tanks Panzer IV, 9 Panzer III tanks, flamethrower. Command vehicles, 27 Hungarian-made Isau tanks, 140 assault and self-propelled guns, 105 engineering vehicles, armored personnel carriers, armored cars.
The operation led the Soviet Union to analyze enemy and their own losses. In conclusion, it is worth mentioning that human losses were also quite significant on both sides. According to official data, the troops of the 3rd Ukrainian Front in the Second Battle of Lake Balaton from March 6th to 15th lost 8.5 thousand people killed and missing, and 24.5 thousand people wounded. German losses reached 27,000 people according to Soviet data. And the defeat near Lake Balaton, one of General Guderian's quotes, was the grave of the Panzerwaffe in the literal and figurative sense. Like the video, subscribe to my channel. See you next time.